What is up, everybody? Eddie Barco here, and let me welcome you to the Nebula Music Podcast. If you're joining me for the very first time, I do this every week. I bring on amazing musicians, bands, artists, anyone who's basically doing something cool in the music industry. I bring them on the show and do my best to get inside their mindset. Today's a very special episode because I have not one, but two people joining me on the episode. I have Andy Warren and Matthew Dipanni from the Mowglis, a very successful band, joining me on the interview. It was really cool because we got a chance to talk about their thought process, what it's like to be touring, what it's like to be playing in venues. And we even talked about how they basically went from just hanging out in Los Angeles to touring all around the nation in just a couple of years. And so I'm very excited to share this conversation with you. It's a very good one if you're in a band or trying to get to that next level. Andy and Matthew do a good job of breaking down what it's like, how much hard work they put into it, and really about songwriting and how they approach their music. At the end of the episode, if you do enjoy the conversation, definitely consider subscribing because I do this every week. I bring on the best musicians I can find, and I know that it inspires others to continue doing their passion because at the end of the day, that's what we're all here for. We're all here to learn from everyone, and we're here to get inspired to continue doing what we love. But let's not waste any more time. Let's dive right into the conversation. All right, what's up, everybody? Eddie Barco here again, and today I'm very excited. And I mean that I am incredibly excited because I have some individuals on the show from a very known band, a very well-known band that I've actually listened to their music, and I love what they do. And I'm excited that I get some of the band members on my show today. One of them who's actually driving at the moment, Mr. Andy Warren and Mr. Matthew Dipanni. How are you guys doing today, man?
Hey, man. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, doing really well. Thank you for having us today.
Yeah, I want my audience to try and guess who's the one that's driving because one of you sounds super chill and the other one sounds kind of focused.
Whoever's driving right now should honk the horn.
Okay, I'm gonna do it. Well, that just gave it away who it is.
That just gave it away.
All right, I'm gonna fucking honk the horn. There we go.
Well,
did that pick up?
See, I love what I do, man. I get a chance to talk to really cool musicians that are doing cool things. You guys finally just got off the road. You guys play for a band called the Mowglis. You guys have had some very good success over the past couple of years, have released some incredible music, and have been incredibly busy touring. And so I'm glad I caught you guys at a moment where, well, one of you is driving, but for the most part, you guys have some free time to sort of talk about, you know, your lives and just stuff like that. And so I don't want to bore anyone with my voice or things that I have to say. I would much rather hear from you guys. And so let's do this. I mean, this is the first time I've had two people on the show like simultaneously. So I want to learn more about your backstories. Why don't you guys catch me up, Andy or Matthew, both of you guys at the same time? I don't know. Why don't you guys just let me know sort of how things started, how you guys met and that sort of thing.
Kick it off, Matt.
All right, sure. Well, I mean, I guess I met Andy in middle school. I met a couple of the band members in middle school. But the way that the band met, we were just all friends from a long time ago in middle school, high school, hanging out. And one day, I know for me, one day I just got a call from a few friends, from this guy, Michael, who used to be in the band, and Colin, one of our singers. And they were looking for a bass player. And I guess I knew how to play bass. So they called me. They said, come over. We have some really cool songs for you to listen to. And I learned how to play like a few of these songs. And then we just started writing together every day and hanging out and playing a bunch of shows. And I've known all these guys now for, I don't know, some of them for like 20 years, I think now. Like Andy, at least, like since 6th grade.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Damn, how many times do you guys get at each other's throats? That's what I'm curious about. 20 years is a long time of musical friendship.
It's funny because me and Matt's relationship actually began with at each other's throats.
A little bit.
He used to kind of bully me actually, which is kind of hilarious because we're now in a band together. And not like he was like messing with me all the time, but like his locker was next to mine, and like I would talk shit and he would talk shit, and he would like push me, and we were. I
had some like middle school angst, and for some reason Andy was the punching bag, you know?
Oh, Andy.
But it's fine. Like, you know, we're good now.
Yeah, I mean, without him now, I can't play the songs live. I need my drummer.
Part of me wonders if Andy's taking out that aggression on the drums. You ever think about that?
Every time I just see Matt Dipanni's face on like each drum when I hit it.
Oh man, now I know. Okay.
Now you know.
That's what makes it sound so great live. When people ask him, "Hey, what's your secret?" It's just like, I just picture
Pent
the
up
bass.
aggression.
I picture the bass player on the cymbals, and there you go. Well, guys, I mean, like I said a little bit earlier, I really wanted to thank you guys for taking time to, sit down and talk with me. And I love what you guys do with your music. For those of you guys joining in on the episode for the first time or who are not familiar with the Mowglis, you guys have been around since, I want to say like 2011 or so, like 2012?
2009 is when we actually formed.
Really?
And I think our first record before we signed to a label was out in like 2011, 2012, something like that. So yeah, it's something like 2009 is when we started.
Got it. And can I ask you guys real quick, like, what were you guys doing? So before the band joined, right, you guys were all essentially musicians doing different things, and some of you guys knew each other, just like, you and Andy. I'm curious, like, what were you guys doing prior to the band forming and you guys writing songs together? Were you guys part of other projects, or were you doing other things on your own? Or walk me through a little bit, like, how that was like.
Yeah, well, so my trajectory to the Mowglis is a little bit different than everybody else's. I'm the new guy still, even though I grew up with everybody. I joined the band in, I guess I want to say like 2012, and which was like the perfect time to join, because literally it was like right when they started, like, they signed the record deal, they started going on tours. Like, I just kind of slid in there at the perfect moment. But the thing that was kind of happening before all that was we were all part of this music collective in Los Angeles called the Collective CA, which
Really?
I was in other bands playing shows with the Mowglis, and that's kind of how I fell into their universe. They kind of, and just by being in other bands and playing shows all the time, we would play multiple shows a day sometimes, in Venice Beach to Hollywood. We were just really getting around and hustling. And I think the whole collective started from our connection of just playing bands together since we were kids, growing up playing music in high school, middle school. Some of us go really far back through musical connections. So,
in that collective, was that something like official, or was it just something that you guys created together? And by that I mean, like, was it like a movement, or like a not like a company? But you get what I'm saying? Like, was it like a group?
It was like a guerrilla movement. It was just a bunch of friends together, getting together, up to 20 different bands, where there was at least one degree of connection between someone, and different people played in the different bands. I would play drums in like 3 bands in like one night. And then like someone else would like hop it up, like they'd be singing lead in one band, playing bass in another. So we kind of just saw that there were so many bands in LA, such an oversaturated scene. And we were like, if we can just kind of create an army of bands and just play all the time, maybe we can create some waves and make some noise and get noticed. And the collective now, whatever it is, 8 years later, has kind of dissolved because of, life and everyone's careers going and taking off in different ways. But looking back on those days, it was a very magical time. We were definitely doing something very special.
Yeah. Matthew, were you a part of that at all?
Yeah, I was. There was a few people that started it, and I was definitely involved in that like startup of it. And it was, the way I looked at it always and still is that it was our answer to knowing this many people playing music and making great records, and not having anyone in the record industry looking at it yet. It was like our answer to a record label, and we just wanted to put out music and play shows as often as possible. And we were just like taking over venues and doing multiple stages, like kind of like festival style. Like one stage would end and we'd have another room set up with a second stage, and another band would go on right away. It was like a seamless collective of musicians. We had everything going at the same time, and then it would sort of just culminate at the end of the night with the Mowglis playing a set, and people from other bands, like Andy was saying, people from other bands would just join in and like grab a guitar and play a solo in a part, or everyone group sing and everything. It was a very interesting time to start up and do something like that. And it is a little difficult to know that like most of the bands aren't even around anymore that were on the collective and doing that stuff. And I think we're probably the only band that's still going from that. And it really did help our career. It helped like show Hollywood and show Los Angeles that we weren't just stuck playing in one or two little areas of the state and the city. We could get everywhere, and we were like starting to get everywhere from that.
Yeah. And you know what? There's something interesting about that I wanted to explore just a little bit, because LA, it's my home, right? I'm born and raised in LA, and I love it. And anytime I meet a musician or something, I'm gung-ho. You need to come out to LA and live here for a little bit, because I'm in love with it. I love the scene.
Yeah, absolutely.
But like what you said is very interesting, because there's so much talent in LA. Honestly, like hands down, LA has to be one of the top cities in the country that just has like good talent coming in here 24/7. And so it can be very easy, in my opinion, at least, to sort of get.
Totally.
Well, I mean, it could be easy to sort of get lost amongst like everything that's happening, because everyone is so good. So what I'm curious about, and what you mentioned a little earlier, is that, you know, your band is arguably one of the ones that kind of took off from that group, and everyone else obviously helped and was working on their craft, but yours was obviously one of the most successful. Do you feel like the reason, or I guess what I'm curious about is, why do you think your band, the Mowglis, was the one that sort of took a lot of those lessons and a lot of those experiences and expanded the most with it, if that makes sense?
I can say, because I joined the band, like I said, later in the game, so I kind of always had that outsider perspective of what the Mowglis were doing. Like, I moved back to Los Angeles from college, and
where'd you go, if I can ask?
I went to UC Santa Cruz.
Oh, nice. Beautiful.
Yeah, just amazing up there. Just like 5 hours north. But right when I moved home in 2009, I got an email from Michael, who used to be in the Mowglis, and he was like, "This is my band I'm working on now." I remember putting it on, and instantly, the song was San Francisco. It was kind of the first song they released, and I was like, "This is gonna be." It was exciting. It was different. It was fun. Like you could just kind of feel the energy through the original demo of that song.
Yeah.
And so when all these shows were happening with the collective, it was always kind of the Mowglis they would always headline. They'd always close out the night. And, you know, I wasn't even in the band yet. I wasn't even in any of the first collective event. I wasn't in any bands. And I went to the event, and I was like, whoa, like, I want to be a part of this scene. This is cool. And like that night leaving, I started a band with a couple other people that were there. And then we got put on a bill, you know, like a couple months later for the next collective event. And that was how cool it was. Like, you could go and just like, I didn't even have a band at the time, and was so inspired by what I saw. And they were so inviting to, like, you know, we created something basically to get involved in the scene, and they were so inviting to us. So the Mowglis were kind of like being these almost like leaders and role models the whole time. Like and I remember too, like you can always go to the website. We had this website. You could go check the stats of like how each band was doing. And so, you know, I was going to check my band's cool. Stats, like how many visits to the page and like interactions with people coming. Mowgli's, though, always top of the list, light years ahead of every other band. And I just think it's because from the very beginning, they kind of curated this vibe that was just infectious.
There's just always an intention when the band was formed, and like Andy joined into that intention, and he already knew that he wanted to be part of it by being in other bands and being part of the collective. But like when we started this band, the intention was always that the music and the message is for everyone else as well as us. It's not just, we're not artists just sitting there writing records to make ourselves feel better. We're writing songs to make everyone else feel better, and we can go put those into rooms filled with 500,000 people, whatever it is, and those people can come into the show and walk away feeling infinitely better. So the intention was always like, we're all in this shit together, you know. We shouldn't ever exclude anyone. So that's why it was like Andy formed a band and was on the bill the next week, you know, doing shows. Like, we wanted him there. So it's like that was just always something we always wanted to do, was just include people.
Which is fascinating. And it's, you know what, it's probably one of the reasons why you guys were incredibly successful. And one of the things that's interesting about what you said is that, you know, quote unquote intention. I personally believe that's a huge factor in any sort of success, you know, regardless of the industry, whether it's music or art or whatever it is. I think having that intention, and by that, I'm actually curious to explore that a little bit further with you guys. Like, obviously your intention was to be more inclusive and to, you know, create this sort of vibe and environment that you guys were very successful in creating. But even going a little bit further than that, with the band, was it always the intention to be as commercially successful as possible, or maybe not even commercially, but to sort of be able to take it to that next level? Was that always the mindset, or was the mindset more along the lines of, like you said, just kind of sort of ensuring that your music was always good enough to be enjoyed by everyone and for it to sound good, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think there were some people that only wanted to do the music and make it free for everyone and whatever. But for most of us, we started playing music for fun in our lives, but music showed us that it could be a career. And
Yeah.
it should be something that we have the intention of both. We should be giving people something that makes them feel great and personally makes them feel amazing. But also, like, it's still a business. It's still an industry. You have to know that going in. If you really want to succeed, you have to be strategic with what you do with your art in order to make it profitable at all. But I do think that most of us realize, like, this could be our career if we play the cards right. So both the intentions were there at all times.
Yeah, and do you feel like having and again, this is probably just more of like a broad speculative question, but I find it interesting because obviously, like we were saying before, LA being such a huge town full of talented people, there definitely is a big difference between the people that sort of take it seriously, quote unquote seriously, and those that don't. And I'm curious if you feel like that balance, right? Being able to understand that, hey, my art is important and I'm gonna explore it as much as I can, but I also have to understand that it has to be sellable in that way. And I don't mean to say it's sellable, but it's a business.
It has to be valuable.
There you go.
It has to have a value. And for a long time, we wanted the collective and everything like that. That was a chance for us to give away music for free, because there was no need for us to profit in that era of the Mowglis and those bands. It was just about giving people something to listen to that made them feel great. But then you see that if you want to tour, if you want to move your message and your intention across the country and then eventually across the world, there has to be a way to fund it. And, none of us were lucky enough to just be handed a bunch of money. So we had to go find it, and we had to eventually sell music and make it the business that it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's okay. Like, there is no selling out anymore. Now there is, you can have a career if you choose the right business path with your art.
I love that. Yes, absolutely. Because, and again, I'm just rambling on here, because I love what you're saying, and I love how,
ramble on.
No, I mean, your responses are very good, and it shows, because you guys are a very good band, very successful, and it shows how you guys put so much thought into the work that you do. But I love that you guys also spent, I don't know how I would describe it, but it was very much like an incubation period in my eyes. You guys, like you said, spent time sort of giving away your art, because you guys were honing it, and then once you guys wanted to go to the next step or figure out how to, I guess, evolve your career, that's when you guys figured out how you guys can combine, both the art and everything else in between. Is that necessary? Do you feel like having a sort of period, and not necessarily a period of giving stuff away, but I guess I would call it an incubation period for any sort of artist or band or whatever, where you're sort of honing your skills and allowing the art to sort of be free and, sort of taking a life of its own. Do you feel like that's necessary for almost every band or every artist to go through before they can actually sort of shift into a more like strategic mindset, if that makes sense? For either one of you, I'm curious.
I think that it's incubation right now for our band, and for me, being an artist is kind of always is a constant state of incubation, that you're always, that you're going to constantly, I'm still striving to learn new things and take risks. And even though we had this phase as the Mowglis where we were out there, giving out music for free, playing every night. That was an incubation process, but it was also just a chapter in our careers, and we keep on having these new chapters begin. And I think that any artist is constantly incubating, even the best ones. They're constantly trying to grow and learn and try new things out.
And you know what? As an existing successful, group or group of musicians like you guys, I'm curious what your opinion is. Like, when do you guys know that it's time to sort of not necessarily take a break, but when that re-incubation period is starting out again? Because, like you said, and it's absolutely true, I constantly see it with the best of the best bands and artists. They go through motions where they're like working hard as fuck for like 2 years, and then they like disappear for a couple of months, and then they come back even better than before. But it's different for everyone. So I'm curious, like for you guys as individual musicians and as a band, like how do you guys know that it's when it's time to sort of, relearn certain things and re-explore your art and evolve, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times for us, sometimes for me, I think like we don't actually have the option to stop and have that incubation period.
Right.
Sometimes there's so much on the table for us to do, and it's hard to say no to a lot of things, because if it fills up your whole year, you've just gone out and spread your message for an entire year. So, then you have to start planning for the next 6 months later.
We're a working class band too. Like we're not U2 or like any. I don't know why I went with U2 out of all the bands.
I don't know why you did either.
But well, they're like a world touring band that like even like a 5-month-old might know who they are. But like a band like that can afford to take a break, disappear for 3 years, go run away in the desert and write an album and not be heard from. Maybe like even like a Tame Impala, that's a cooler example. Like they can do something like that. They can take a break. But like us, we're still on the mission to get to that next level where everyone knows who we are. So that means saying yes to every show and constantly working on new music.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And U2 is a great example. I would have gone with more like Coldplay, you know what I mean? But
they're cool too. Sure.
Now I know what you have on your iPod, man. But it's
everyone
crazy.
has U2 on their iPod. You didn't have a choice. U2 put that album on every.
That is true. That is true. Apple just gave it to me, and it forces me to listen to it every time I turn on my phone. It's just U2.
It's so annoying. But yeah, okay.
No, but you know what? It's interesting because it's so, and I'm glad you bring it up because I'm fascinated by all this. As in some of the tours that I've done and just people that I've played with, it's so interesting to be in that environment where you're on stage and people love it and they see you up there and you're working hard and people. It's so easy for everyone to see you up there and just be like, wow, they made it. Like that's it. Like where else do you go from that point? But it's so fascinating to hear from you that there are different levels, and it is true, and you don't really realize it until you're there. But just because you're like on a tour or you're just performing or your song's on the radio or something, there are so many more levels that come after that in order to continue that momentum going. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean we just got back from tour and it was so awesome. We hadn't been out in about a year, so it was so good to be back in rooms and have people still show up. To be in any random city in the U.S. and have people still show up to your shows is such a humbling, awesome feeling. But still like we're like, all right, that tour was done. It was awesome. Like, what's next? Like, what's the next step? Like, how do we get to that next level? You're constantly trying to hustle to get to that next level.
Yeah. Hell yeah. And so what's the next level, like, in your opinion? Like, what would be the next level for you guys?
Like private jets, opening for U2.
U2.
Stuff like that.
We talked about it. U2, have Apple just force everyone to listen to
exactly. I want Apple to put our album on everybody's phone without like having the option.
I don't like that.
That's the next level. That's not great either. I don't know.
I love it, man. I love it. Well, you know what I'm curious about? So backtracking a little bit, you guys were just letting me know about the collective and stuff and how you guys were forming that. And then you sort of took it to the next level. When did you guys first start to see that your career as a band, right, after the collective, or maybe even during the collective, when did you guys sort of start seeing that, hey, this is actually starting to take off, like right now? Like, do you remember that moment, like when you guys sort of like realized that?
I think I can answer because I still wasn't quite in the band, but the first time I went out with the Mowglis, I went out as their merch guy and videographer. I was just like filming the tour and selling merch for them because I was between jobs and they were going on their first like trip out to Kansas, Oklahoma, and South by Southwest. And I was like, damn, I want to go. Like, I've been seeing them kind of like, I saw that, like, just the fact that they were like, this band from the collective was leaving to go South by and do this tour. I was like, that's cool. I want to go. And they were cool enough to like, let me hop in the car. And for me, not even being in the band, I was like, whoa, these guys are doing it. Like, playing like 4 sets at South by and like people are actually there. Like, for me as a fan of the band, like before I was even in the band, that's when I kind of was like, oh, damn, like this is getting real right here.
Damn, man. What about for you, Matthew? I mean, was it about the same time?
I mean, yeah, that was pretty much like one of our first real experiences leaving California, because we used to tour California almost every weekend. Before Andy was in the band, we would just do LA, San Francisco, and go to San Francisco, play all weekend and come back. We were doing that for like a year straight. And then eventually we wanted to go to South by. We wanted to explore our options and see if we can get somewhere a little further. And I think that was definitely a tour, and that's the tour we actually hired Andy on too. On the way home from that tour, we asked him to be our drummer.
And then you guys discovered that he loved you too, and it was just like, I don't know.
Yeah, huge Bono fan for some reason, you know.
Yeah.
You know what I'm curious about is, I mean, you guys mentioned that prior to, South by Southwest, or even like during around the time, you guys were touring California a lot. And this is something I find fascinating. And so I ask everyone whenever I get a chance, what's the difference? And I'm not even sure if there is a big difference, but between like the musical vibe between like California, and say another place like, like South by Southwest is different because that's in Austin, but in other states, what do you feel like is the vibe in terms of the music scene and how people turn out? Because in my experience, LA and California, primarily LA, tends to be a little difficult unless you have like a massive marketing machine behind you, or you have like already a huge dedicated fan base, which you guys seem to have already. It can be a little difficult sometimes to, fill up a house sometimes. But I'm curious, like,
Totally.
what it's like for you guys when you guys go play in other states or other locations, and where maybe some of your favorite places have been so far, if I can ask.
Right. Well, yeah, LA is definitely, I think you can ask any touring band, even really successful ones, and they'll always tell you that LA is just one of those markets that's a lot of industry. Yep. And it's just so oversaturated with everything. But that being said, there are still true fans in the city of LA. Yep. And, I go to shows all the time in LA as a music fan. But I do notice, like, for instance, on this last tour, like Boston, such an amazing city. And
really?
Like the house was packed. Every single person in that room knew the songs, was dancing, like the energy was contagious. Or like Washington D.C., like seriously, really any stop, like the Midwest loves, like the fan base is so supportive, and people really do come out to shows. They line up hours early, like in these other cities, and like you might not see that in LA as much, but it is really cool when you get to go out on tour and just see how dedicated music fans are out there.
Yeah, people seem like, especially in the middle of the country, people seem to be so focused on music because there's not that many other options of industries or entertainment to them. They can get touring musicians to come through and play these smaller towns or, separate markets and stuff. And that's what they focus on. And they come out because they love it at that point. Like that's what some of them want to do it, and some of them just want to see it because that's what they have. You go to smaller places, and music is all they kind of have there. So some of those markets can continue to just be really good for us too, because they love our records and they still want to come to see us no matter what.
Yeah. And, I'm curious because obviously I think all three of us here are, California locals. Does that ever, and again, I'm sort of just kind of picking your brain, but does that ever like annoy you, when you come back home and just to see like how saturated our home is? And then, especially coming back from somewhere like you said, like Boston, or the Midwest, where there's always really good turnouts. And then you come home and, because it's such a huge machine, it's a lot more, it's just more difficult to actually achieve the same sort of response that you can get somewhere else. Does that ever like bother you at any point?
I don't care.
I love it.
Go ahead.
I mean, it's a little frustrating.
I mean, I think all of us here are living that every single day, and you have to just learn to live with it. And so what I'm curious about specifically right now. So you guys have you started the collective, and then you went to South by Southwest and you started touring, and you had some very big success, and I'm happy for you guys. Now you guys are recently releasing like new music out. Before I even ask about the music, what I'm curious about is how do you guys collaborate when it comes to the songwriting? Because that's something I always find fascinating. In any sort of band environment, you either have like the guy who writes everything, or a group of people who are sort of responsible for the collective version of the song. And so I'm curious for you guys, how does that work for the Mowglis?
Yeah, because that process has changed a lot over the years. Whereas, like in the beginning, we were all kind of together in a garage, just hanging out and writing songs on guitars. But now everyone has such different lives and so much other stuff going on in their lives that people just find time to write when they write. So a lot of times, like Colin and Josh are two of our singers. They're the primary writers for the most part because they are always writing all the time, in and out of like writing sessions with people, and they bring ideas to the table. All of us have different ideas too, but they'll bring a lot of ideas with like a lot of finished parts of songs and you know, full songs and things like that we all can gravitate to and go, this is great. Let's make this a full Mowgli song, and then we'll all just get on it and record it. So the process is just, it's continuously changing at this point, I think, too. You know, we're all just writing different stuff and seeing what kind of sticks to our band.
Yeah, and where do you see the style sort of going? Because I have been listening to your new song.
Yes.
I'm curious, like, how do you see your sound evolving? Because it is a little bit different. Not like, I mean, it's obviously still your sound, but I'm curious, like, with the new stuff that you guys are releasing this year. Because I imagine, or I'm assuming, I think you guys have a new album coming out soon. I know you have a new single out, but I'm curious, like, how your new sound is sort of evolving, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point there's nothing tying us to anything. Like San Francisco singles, like San Francisco, I'm Good, Say It, things like that. They were a time in this band that was different. It was a different incubation period if you go back to that.
Yeah.
But I think now everyone's just so influenced by everything that's going on, regardless of music and pop culture and politics. Everything's influencing our band now. So I think it's tough to say what kind of like genre you can pin our direction going to, because there's just too many things coming in this world that are influencing everyone in different ways. So like, I know our newest single, Kansas City, it's got a little bit more of like an emo vibe to it.
Yeah.
There's a little bit more of like a rock element to that song, whereas the previous single, Real Good Life, was a very pop oriented song. Very much straightforward pop. And I just think at this point, with everyone writing the way that they are and doing different things in their lives, I think we're just exploring every element of music now and trying to do something different. And if it sounds good, it sounds good. And whatever genre it is, it is.
Yeah, I love how you basically describe it like the emo vibe, a little bit of an emo vibe.
We're all emo kids in this band, just so you know.
Oh man, then that means that we can hang. We can actually fucking hang, which I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
We're total emo kids.
So basically, we've walked through how the band was formed and how you guys sort of grew it from the collective, and where you guys are sort of planning on going, and where your music is, you know, today, and how it's going to evolve in the future. I'm curious about both of you guys, like Andy, as a drummer, right? So you and me can relate because I'm a drummer, you're a drummer.
Nice.
So
my dude.
I want to know a little bit more about your influences, your like specific musical influences, and what got you into playing music in the first place. Prior to the Mowglis and the collective, like how long have you been playing and that sort of thing?
Totally, man. Well, I've been playing since I was in 6th grade. I was like a band kid, and I was super into the jazz band stuff. So I've been playing jazz since I was in 6th grade.
So Take the A Train was your jam, right?
Take the A Train. I was all about that Ellington, man. All about it. I did it all through high school, and I did it in college, and I was kind of into like the competitive jazz band scene as well. Ooh. I was like deep into the jazz stuff. But I also was playing in like ska and punk bands growing up in high school. Yeah. So like that's kind of like where I started cutting my teeth playing bands. And there was this venue that Matt knows called the Cobalt, which is a Valley staple where I used to go play every weekend. And that was where I really started getting a taste of like, you know, just how awesome it was to be up on a stage and have people show up. And
isn't it gone?
You know,
the Cobalt is gone.
It's
now.
Gone.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's
gone.
I went there a couple times too. That place has a special place in my heart, man.
Totally. It was a legendary place where you could all ages venue, no alcohol. You could go hang out there on the weekend and see some like hardcore shows or some punk shows, ska shows if you were my band. And all the bands from like the Drive Thru Records day would like come through there. So like, you know, we saw like the Starting Line and Something Corporate and like RX Bandits and Finch and all those bands play on that stage. And it was before they like went on to like, you know, kind of blow up in our high school years. But so I was constantly being inspired by what I was seeing there, and just, you know, Calabasas, where we grew up, is a very musically rich city. So there's a lot. That's where Incubus came from, and Linkin Park. And so like as we were growing up, we were seeing these bands take off, and there's just always been like a lot of musical talent from where we come from.
Nice. I love that concise little history. I mean, so you're a jazz head, or at least originally a jazz head.
Yeah, I still like it, but I don't play it as much, and I don't listen to it as much. But yeah, jazz for life. Take the A train. Yep.
Always. What about you, Matthew? I'm curious.
I guess I started playing music about like 20 years ago, and I asked my parents for a guitar, and they just gave me one for Christmas, and I promised them I'd take lessons, and I just never did. But I kind of just grew up playing like punk songs in my room and teaching myself how to play guitar originally. And I was in like a few little bands with some friends, but I wasn't like Andy. I wasn't like competitive in jazz. I wasn't in a school band or anything. I was just sort of like playing music because I was figuring out what guitar chords were and how to palm mute and things like that. And then a couple of years after that, I actually picked up playing bass because I thought it would be easy to transition, and it turned out to be very difficult. But it became more of a natural instrument to me. Felt more natural to play it. But I guess like that was my upbringing with it. My dad originally played guitar, and I always saw guitars in the house, but I didn't put it together until I was like 12 years old that I really wanted to be a musician and have that be part of my life at some point.
Yeah. Why did bass feel more natural? And that's something that I always hear a lot from bassists. And so, I mean, I can play a little bit of bass, but I'm not a bassist by all means. But that's something that I do hear a lot of bassists tell me, that they start on guitar and that at some point they're like, you know what? Bass felt better. And I'm curious, like, why is that? Or at least what your take on that is.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know exactly why. Maybe it's because my hands were too big for the guitar neck, and I just maybe I just wanted to get less strings and see what would happen. I don't know. I picked it up and played around with it, and it just felt better for some reason. I don't know how to explain it because I was like 14 years old, and I don't even know if I remember it, but it just something about it made me feel. Maybe it was like my relationship to wanting to be more in tune with drums as well, but I couldn't play drums because I was terrible at it. I still can't. And I don't know. I always felt like the rhythm of music was more important than the vocals. And obviously now, like I appreciate everything about a song,
right.
But I guess growing up, it was like the band to me was drums, bass, and guitar.
Yeah.
You know? And then the vocals came after that. I used to write songs without writing any vocals, and then I would write full songs and then try to write the vocals afterwards. I never thought about the vocals first or the melody first or anything like that.
Yeah. You know what? That's interesting because I feel like as a drummer, I sort of approach music the very same way. I'm not a lyricist at all. I mean, I can write like a couple of words that rhyme, but my mind definitely gravitates more towards the rhythm section. And I think it's just natural because we're rhythm guys in that way, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, you know what I'm curious for you two is when it comes to the songwriting, obviously, like you guys were talking about it earlier, whether or not you guys do help with writing the song or you guys have a huge influence on that. I also know that from a drummer's perspective, there's a big difference. Once you write a song, you have to figure out sort of as a drummer, what groove goes with that, you know, with that song, as well as the bass, I would imagine. So I'm curious, like, do you guys work hand in hand, you two, to like take a song that you guys are working on and then sort of just create a groove that works for you two, for both of you?
I think, yeah, a lot of these songs, especially like later in the game, will come to us fully written from a session, and so, you know, sometimes we're in there like building from the ground up on a song, but lately we get a lot of songs delivered to us that kind of have their parts already done.
Really?
And so for recording them, like, you know, I'm trying to learn the parts that when I'm hearing on these demos, trying to kind of match what's programmed at times. And but then when you take the song out live on tour, it's, you know, it's way different.
Yep.
Like things are not working as well on the recordings as they are live. And that's where me and Matt really start to kind of like find a groove with each other. For instance, with like Real Good Life, that song was just kind of a basic dance beat. And it's kind of become, all right, how do we make this a little more just bopping when we're playing it live? So it has a little more life and isn't so rigid. And you know, just by playing the songs over time, we kind of find a groove with them that works for us, especially in the live setting.
Yeah, the live world is definitely where we can explore a little bit more. Like songs are written in this band in a way where they're not precious, but they are like, this is what they are, and there's a lot of ways that like we can alter it and find things that are better than what's already in there. But a lot of times these songs are delivered to us from like Colin and Josh, and they're beautifully written. and there's not a lot that should change. But when you transfer it into a live setting and you're working out transitioning between the song before and the song after, and trying to find maybe a cooler part in the middle of the song where that you want to maybe change the key or do something different, that's where him and I can definitely get more involved and try different things.
Yeah, I'm curious, like, how open are you guys to sort of experiment, or I guess what a better question would be, like, what's your liberty on stage? Because you're absolutely right. A record's very different. You have all these elements going on that make a song sound full, but when you're on stage, you can't have as many of those elements going on, at least not well. How open are you guys, or what liberty do you, both of you guys, have to sort of explore that groove on stage and to kind of just play around? Or do you guys keep it pretty much simple, and then you guys have allocated times to sort of just, jam out, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, there's moments in the set where we get to jam, and I try and keep my parts simple and kind of match. But at the same time, like, you'll hear maybe 100 more drum fills in our live show than you will on our album. So, like, there's definitely room to take liberties and get a little more creative in the live set, just because we're feeling it live, and there's certain, a lot of times when you're recording, like, a producer will be like, that's a cool fill, but like, we're going to let this vocal speak here, or we're going to, there's going to be some production element, but in the live show, it's a little grittier, a little, not as polished, I want to say. So there is a little more room to get, I always get to feel like I get to be creative, and I'm stimulated by like what I'm getting to do in our live show. I'm having fun, and it is a little slightly different than what you might hear my parts on the album, but still definitely in the same world and not veering too far. You gotta honor the song first and foremost. You can't just be like doing a drum solo over the whole set.
Absolutely. You know what I'm curious about, Andy, is how long did it take for you to learn that lesson about, the song comes first? And I ask this because as a drummer, and I think you might know what I'm talking about, and a lot of my fans are drummers too, this is just something that resonates with me really well. It takes a long time to learn to sort of chill as a drummer. You know what I mean? Like, totally. Especially coming from a jazz background where you have to learn so much complicated shit, and then to transfer from that to something like ska, which is still a little complicated, but then to like pop where it's a little more straightforward, it can be difficult sometimes. I'm curious how long it took for you, and maybe even you, Matt, too, because I'm not a bassist. I don't know how complex it can be, but like, how long did it took you and Matt to sort of get used to serving the song as opposed to serving yourself as a musician?
I mean, I definitely feel like this last 5 or 6 years of touring that's some growth that I have learned in terms of just serving the song. And I was definitely stubborn before then, and wanted to play my parts my ways and like play loud and do my fills, and but you hear back from your bandmates like, don't do that here, and I think the instant reaction for any drummer is to kind of be like, get defensive, and we're all guilty of doing that, but like over these last 5 or 6 years, I think it has been a really cool thing to kind of learn, okay, like these people are here to hear these songs. And they're here, they're here for a show. They're here to have a good time, but like, they want to hear these songs, and that's what's really important. And I guess my answer to your question is it took me a good 5 years of touring to finally learn it. And I think I still at certain times am learning it. Like, we'll be playing a song, and sometimes like I might be hitting a little too loud, and my bandmate will turn around and like tell me to, keep it down. And I'm like, I get lost in it still sometimes, where I'm just like, this is so fun, haha, bash, bash, bash. But like, you need to constantly keep your head on and keep your, stay focused and realize what you are there doing.
That's why sometimes I want to get an electric kit, but it just does not look as cool as having a real kit, because then it wouldn't matter how hard you hit the head.
It's just not the same.
Don't do that.
It's too late. What about you, Matt? I mean, is that ever a thing that sort of, bass players suffer through? Because you guys are responsible for doing groovy shit, man. Like, without a good bass player, I mean, I know people say that a good band needs to have a good drummer, and that is definitely true. I believe that as a drummer, but also
feel that too.
I mean, bass lines. I can listen to bass lines all day. I mean, Motown bass lines, dude, get out of here. So, like, I'm saying, like, for you as a bassist, like, how difficult is that to sort of learn to, take a step back and figure out what works best for a song?
Well, I actually, that's kind of how I started when I started first recording. I learned real quick that by working with a producer, the bass part needs to be pretty perfect with like the vocal melody and everything and what it's falling in line with. And I learned very quickly in my like first year of recording that I can just sort of let the bass line be produced in situations, very specific situations, songwriting situations and stuff. It didn't bother me I didn't need to have like the craziest, funkiest thing going on. Like it just, whatever made the song more important through the bass was the most important to me. So it kind of humbled me in my beginning stages of like recording, and I transferred that into my live setting where I was just like, I'll play something, and if it's like a little more intense and someone notices, then we can talk about it. But for the most part, I'm just like, all right, let's play the right thing. Let's play the thing that makes you feel the most between the drums and the bass and the keys and everything like that. Not the thing that makes the musician the happiest to play.
Right.
It's not just about me at that point. So you can take yourself away from it for a second and just be okay with whatever the line is, even if it's very simple.
Absolutely. And you know what? I think we touched upon this like throughout the whole entire conversation, but do you feel like that mindset, and again, I'm curious about this because I talk to so many people and I love exploring the mindset behind everyone else. Is that a common theme that you guys see in successful bands where the musicians are all willing to sort of work together as a unit? And maybe I probably know the answer, obviously, but I'm curious what you guys think on that. Like, is it absolutely necessary for everyone to sort of be able to take a step back and hold each other's hands, metaphorically speaking, when you're on stage, and then allowing each other to sort of shine when the moment is right, but then for the most part being willing to just be like, all right, this is my part, this is what my job is, and I gotta be in this little in this job, if that makes sense?
Yeah,
I mean, yeah. Go ahead.
Like you said, like I think like the answer is pretty obvious. It's like that if you were to go see a band and the guitar player was just in his own world, or it's like just shedding, like just there's like that one video of the drummer who's just like at the wrong gig.
Oh, the wedding
it's like
one,
a little church band, and the guy's just fucking rocking out way too hard, and he's like, I don't even think he's that good, but it's kind of like that's an analogy of just like. You can't overpower, even if like you're playing your parts right. Like any good band, you're gonna need to know when your moment is to shine and when to sit back. And even if you go see a band, like if you're go to some band you love and the guitar was too loud, like that's gonna be distracting. That's gonna take you out of it. So I think the hallmark of any good band is a proper balance of sound and respect to the song and to each other on stage of proper dynamics and how to kind of just make it function as one unit.
Yeah, I mean, a band is supposed to be multiple people with a unified decision, So it's different when you're in a band that's run by one person and everyone else is hired. You have to do what that one person wants. But when it comes to a live setting with a 6-person band, there's going to be differences of opinions on how things happen.
Yep.
But you have to come to that decision no matter what, because you have to play to the audience. You have to know that whatever room you're about to step in, you have to give them everything that you've planned for and rehearsed for. So it's just about the show at that point. It's about making that set the most important thing to the audience.
Absolutely. I loved how you guys are so in tune when it comes to that, because you know what? I grew up playing with a lot of different bands. I was very fortunate enough to play with some pretty professional ones early on, but I definitely could see that difference, with the people that took it seriously, like we were talking about earlier, and the people that didn't. There's definitely a lot more, in my opinion. Obviously, I could be wrong, but I think there's a big difference and a big selfish difference when you're sort of willing to do what's necessary to make it or to, go to the next level, as opposed to, just you thinking to yourself, I'm right. I have to do everything my way. I want to play drums this way. And if the band doesn't like it, then, they can go to hell, sort of thing. But I mean, I think that speaks more to your character than anything else. I think you have to be a team player in this industry, especially if you're willing to make it, unless you're going to become, some solo drummer or a solo bassist. Right. You know what I mean? Like, you have to, being a team player is absolutely necessary no matter what.
Yeah. Right. If you're going to be in a band, you can't be an asshole anymore. Like
anymore.
I think like in the 80s and 90s with the big rock and alternative movement, people acted a certain way and treated the fans and the audience a certain way. But now it's like there's so many musicians, there's so much access to music, and a musician is popping up every minute on Instagram and on YouTube. So there's no reason for anyone to be a jerk to anyone anymore. The industry is open and wide enough now. Everyone has the capability of making themselves a successful musician online or offline. So there's no room for assholes. And if you're going to be in a band, you better know that you're going to deal with multiple people and multiple opinions. And if you can't handle that, you shouldn't be in a band.
Absolutely, man. Well said. I mean, fucking well said. I mean, anyone else who's out there trying to be in a band, or take it from these guys, because they absolutely know exactly how you have to behave in order to, to sort of, to make a band work. And you know what I'm curious about, as we sort of start wrapping things up, what I'm curious about what you said just now, with the whole social media thing and everything being a little bit more accessible. How is social media sort of affecting the music industry in your opinion? And obviously this is a random topic that I bring up, but I do so because I know a lot of guests that come through the show and a lot of other musicians that are sort of looking for ways to, quote unquote, make it or, take their band to the next level. Social media tends to be that like immediate quick answer, which I'm a huge fan of, but I'm also kind of indifferent towards it. I think it's a balance. And I'm curious how you guys see it impact sort of like band culture. There's a difference between being like a guitarist on Instagram and just playing your shit. But like as a band, do you feel like social media affects the sort of like the dynamic that you have as a band or like your identity as a band to the world at any point, if that makes any sense? And maybe I'm just sort of rambling, but I'm curious what you think.
No. I think like for us, social media is so crucial to our branding and to us being a band. We have the access to respond to fans on Twitter and Instagram and be personal with them, show them that we're just human beings and that they have something to say. We can say something back to them and talk to them. It makes people feel very important. It makes our job more personal, and it makes our brand go further. We can talk to people in different countries that we haven't been to yet, and they love our music, and they buy our albums and stuff like that. Whereas before, to me, it was weird back when social media started with music, because you think of the start of it, and I think of MySpace. Yeah. And MySpace was so important to record labels in like 2002 to 2005. Like if I used to work with a band that Josh was in, actually, our guitar player and singer Josh, and we did 20 showcases to major labels back to back. And the reason they wouldn't sign the band, it wasn't the music, it was the fact that their band didn't have a MySpace. Wow. And now you think about that, it's like you can now be the most famous musician on Twitter and not have a SoundCloud, not have anything on Spotify. Like you can go tour and have like one thing on Tidal if you want, and you're still famous. Like there's so much access to it now. And I think social media it destroys a lot of people, and it makes people more aware of so many more things that they may have not wanted to be aware of. Yeah. But in that same sense, it also shows you what's going on, and you have access to everything. And I think that's important.
Yeah, well said, by the way. You're absolutely right. I'm not trying to get derail the conversation, but very good point on the social media does give you access, and it shows you things that maybe you didn't want to be aware of. But well said on that part. I'm like, I gotta write that down. I'm gonna save that for another conversation.
Sure.
I mean, how necessary do you think it is for a band to be close or personable with their fans these days on social media? Because obviously, and bouncing off of what you said, it's more of like a balance, in my opinion. You got to be able to turn off whenever you get a chance and sort of balance both worlds. But as a band, I think you do have access to your fans more. But there's some bands that don't do it, but there's some bands that do, like you guys. And so what I'm curious about is, why or how necessary do you think it is to be personable with your fans and to show them that, hey, I'm a real dude just like you, come to a show or like respond to comments or whatever it may be? Like, why is that important in your eyes?
I think it's super important because we'll roll into a town and we can literally associate our fans now like by their Twitter handles, like, oh, there's Super Indie Kid, or there's
that's awesome.
Like, I can only think of Super Indie Kid, but we know so many people who are...
Shout out to Super Indie Kid.
Yeah.
What up,
Sam
dude?
Ramsey, what's up, dude? But we know so many fans through our interactions on Twitter, and it makes like, and for us, for instance, it's like we've been touring now for 5 or 6 years. Like we've seen some of these kids like either graduate high school now or graduate college, and like we like get,
When it goes to that, it freaks me out. I love it.
like, like get to kind of see this like through our social connections with them. It's like makes it that much more special when they come to your show or they get something, like.
Yeah.
No, he was going to get to something very important there.
So it makes it more, and for them, that's just for us. For them, it's even more important. These people look up to us, and now they can actually communicate with us, and we can favorite each other's tweets, and we can even comment back and forth and interact, and it's a game changer. It's very crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the music industry was like, you think about a band like the Beatles. When the Beatles were famous in their time, like starting out and everything, and coming to America, you liked the Beatles because you liked the Beatles. You liked their music. You liked who they were.
Yeah.
But you didn't have a chance to interact with them. You see those videos of fans just fainting around them and stuff. They didn't get the chance to be, on social media talking to these people.
Yeah.
And I think social media changed.
The Beatles had Twitter?
I know. I'm trying to imagine that right now, man. That's mind blown.
Things might have been different. And I think like a social media platform changed the music industry in that way, where there are bands from that generation that don't need to communicate with people on Twitter because they already communicated with everyone for decades with their records.
Yeah.
But now, if you're a band or an artist putting out, a single every 6 months or whatever, and you're just promoting it online, that's how these people are going to know who you are. Yeah. They're going to know you because you have a social presence on the internet. But not, we're not in that time of the record industry anymore where you didn't need that.
Yeah, and so incredibly important. I'm glad that you guys are on the same page because it's so incredibly important. And Andy, I think you were cutting in and out a little bit on your conversation, but I loved what you were saying. We were feeling your passion as you were cutting in and out.
Okay, yeah.
We were like, he's he's spitting some truth, he's laying down some important facts, and we're just gonna imagine what he's saying. But you know what? I'm glad that you guys.
It was really good. I swear, it was really all good.
We feel you, Andy. We were with you, bud.
We caught
good,
like
good.
The last part of it, but it was good. And I say this, on the show, I bring on good guests and people that I love what they do, and everyone has a different mindset and approach to different things. But the one thing that I do see as a pattern from every successful artist that I've talked to is, they're willing to make changes and they're willing to sort of be accessible, be an individual, and just use their resources to their full potential, be it social media, be it music, be it a label, whatever it may be. Everyone's willing to go the full mile. And I can definitely see that based off of our conversation. I can see that you guys are willing to go that full mile. You guys are currently doing it. You guys are working your asses off and making sure that you guys are being the best that you guys can possibly be on social, on music, on your instruments. Like, it's just, you guys are the full package. And I can see that as a working band. I can see why you guys are seeing that success. And I'm hoping that I can sort of reflect this with someone else who's listening and trying to form their own band, that they can sort of reflect and see what you guys are doing and apply it to their own work.
That's always been the hope, is what we're doing. I don't know if it's the right thing or whatever, but it's what we're doing, and we're hoping that it will always help people want to keep doing what we're doing and inspire people to do what we're doing.
Absolutely, man. And I love what you guys are doing, and I can't thank you guys enough for being on the show. An hour literally flew by, and I didn't even realize it. But
crazy.
I know, it's super crazy. Even though you, Andy, you were like basically half into this conversation because you kept cutting in and out.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
But you are an hour closer to Vegas right now.
That is true.
Yeah, it's true. I'm an hour closer to losing all my money.
Oh, that's what you do in Vegas, man. And I love it. And thank you guys so much for taking the time out of your busy days, and you, Andy, out of your busy drive to talk to me. And one of the things I love to do at the end of every episode, and even though we've had a great conversation, if you guys have said it all really, really well, if there's someone out there, most likely there is, listening to this episode with a band or a group that they're sort of trying to push together or push to the next level, and they're wondering what they can be doing better or what they can be doing today to sort of, help themselves get better like you guys did. What are some of the steps, or basically what is something that you guys would advise for them to be doing today, or sometime real soon for them to be focusing on, so that they can actually get their band, moving upwards, whether they're in LA or another city? Like, what would you guys be advising them to do? And I know it's a broad question. I
would tell artists or people that are definitely trying to be artists or trying to be film, TV, music, whatever it is, be different. Don't just try to mimic what is popular right now, because what's popular right now won't be what's popular when you finally make something that is popular.
Yeah.
Just try to do something different that stands out. Because, like I said, if everyone has access to everything now, you have to find something that they don't have access to.
Also, on top of that, just be true to yourself. And I always tell people, say yes to like every opportunity that comes your way. If I said no to like one of these random gigs, I might have never met the Mowglis. I guess I grew up with them, but I know I'd have never crossed those paths with them. If I was, being open to new experiences opened so many doors for me. So I think any artist should always keep their views open and say yes.
Absolutely, man. Well said. Man, Andy, Matthew, the Mowglis, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be on the show.
Thank you so much
thanks
for having us.
Yeah, it was fun.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Andy and with Matthew. I know that I definitely did. And you know what? I say this at the end of every episode. It's starting to get cheesy for me, but I'm always learning from every conversation that I have with my guests. It's what keeps me motivated to continue doing this podcast. And I hope that someone, or at least one of you out there, feels inspired after this conversation, because the reality is when you're trying to do what you love, it can be hard sometimes, but Andy and Matthew really broke down what it is that they do to sort of, keep it going and sort of stand above the competition. And I love what they had to say. I love their approach to music. I love how their music sort of describes what they're feeling and how they each help each other out. And it was just an amazing story that they shared with me. And I'm happy that they're on the show. And I encourage all of you, no matter where you're at in your career, no matter if you even have a collective to be a part of, if you have a whole bunch of friends, or even if you're just by yourself, continue doing what it is that you love to do, music-wise, artistic-wise, any sort of thing that you're into doing. Even if you don't see any results today, continue doing it, because you never know how long it's going to take to get there. But the reality is you will get there, and I guarantee you that. You will definitely get there. I'm still doing my thing. To be honest with you, I'm still always working hard, so I want to make sure that you understand that, and that you, today, if I can help inspire you to get back into it and do your thing today, then I know I did my job. And as I said at the beginning of the episode, if you enjoyed this interview, please consider subscribing. Apple Podcast, Google Play, even Anchor, basically anywhere that you can find a podcast, I'm on that platform. Consider subscribing, because I do this every week. I bring on really cool people, and as you can see, these conversations definitely help inspire you to continue doing your thing. And definitely stay tuned in, because I've got lots of great content coming your way.